The winter storm arrived without warning, turning the Montana plains into a wall of white that swallowed everything in sight. The wind howled like a living creature, beating against the wooden walls of Emily Turner's small ranch cabin. She had seen storms before, but nothing like this one. This blizzard was the kind that people talked about for years, the kind that could take a life in minutes. Emily wrapped a scarf around her face and stepped outside to secure her animals before the snow piled too high. The cold hit her like a slap, sharp and bitter. Her boots sank deep into the heavy snow as she pushed through the swirling storm. Every breath felt like ice in her chest, but she kept moving. She had lived alone for years and had learned to take care of herself no matter how harsh the weather became. She reached the barn and checked the latches, making sure her horses and goats were safe inside. They were frightened, stamping and snorting at the noise of the wind. Emily tried to calm them, patting their necks and whispering softly. When she stepped back out into the storm, she could barely see 2 steps ahead. That was when she noticed something strange near the line of trees behind her cabin. At first she thought it was only the snow shifting. The storm played tricks on the eyes, creating shapes that vanished in seconds. But then she saw it again. A small, dark movement against the endless white. Her heart tightened. No animal moved like that. It looked too slow. Too weak, too desperate. Emily hesitated only for a moment before she pushed forward. The wind almost knocked her sideways as she trudged toward the trees. Each step was a fight. The snow came up to her knees, and the freezing air burned her skin even through her scarf and coat. Still, she moved on. Something inside her whispered that whatever was out there needed her help. As she got closer, the shapes became clearer. 2 small figures huddled together in the snow. Barely moving, Emily felt her breath catch. They were children, a boy and a girl, both so young that it hurt her heart to look at them. Their clothes were thin, their faces pale and frozen. The boy was trying to shield the girl with his body, but he was shaking so badly that he could hardly stay upright. Emily dropped to her knees in front of them. She brushed the snow from their faces. The little girl's eyes fluttered open. Confused and scared, the boy tried to speak, but the cold had stolen his voice. They were freezing to death right in front of her. "You're going to be okay," Emily whispered. Even though she wasn't sure they could hear her, she quickly scooped the girl into her arms, then helped the boy stand. He swayed, nearly collapsing, but he clung to Emily's coat with numb fingers. The wind grew stronger, pushing against them as if trying to pull them back into the storm. Emily tightened her grip on the children and forced her legs to move. Step by step, she could feel the weight of the girl. Light as a feather, yet heavy with fear, the boy stumbled beside her, leaning on her as they fought their way toward the cabin. By the time they reached the porch, Emily's arms were aching and her lungs felt like they were on fire. She kicked the door open and moved inside quickly, slamming it shut behind them. Warm air filled the room, but the children were still dangerously cold. Emily laid them near the fireplace, lighting it quickly with trembling hands. She wrapped them in blankets and rubbed their hands and feet gently to bring back their warmth. The girl cried softly, a weak and cracked sound. The boy finally managed to whisper a single word. Papa. Emily felt a sharp ache in her chest. Whoever their father was, he was out there in the storm searching for them. But right now, these children needed her more than anything. She heated water, prepared warm broth, and fed them slowly, praying they would recover. As the blizzard roared outside, Emily sat beside the 2 little strangers. She looked at their small faces, their tear-filled eyes, and their shaking hands. She didn't know their story, where they came from, or how they ended up lost in a deadly storm. But one thing was certain: if she hadn't seen them when she did, they would not have survived the night, and Emily Turner wasn't about to let that happen. The fire crackled softly as warmth slowly returned to the small cabin. Emily stayed close to the 2 children, checking their hands, their breathing, and the color in their cheeks. She knew the first few hours after rescuing someone from a blizzard were the most dangerous. The cold could hide inside the body, creeping back like an invisible enemy. The girl lay curled in the thick wool blanket, her eyelashes still dusted with tiny bits of ice. The boy sat upright now, though he trembled every few minutes, trying to look brave for his little sister. Emily admired his courage. He looked no older than 8, Yet he held himself like someone who had already faced too much. She offered them warm broth again. The boy accepted it with both hands. Carefully lifting the cup to his lips, the girl hesitated, her eyes scanning the room nervously before Emily smiled gently and guided the cup toward her. "You're safe now," Emily whispered. "You're inside, you're warm, and no one will hurt you." The girl took a small sip, then a bigger one. Then she leaned against Emily's arm as if she had known her for years. Emily's heart softened instantly. After a long silence, the boy finally spoke. His voice was broken and quiet. "My name is Little Bear," he said. "This is my sister." Feather Emily repeated their names softly, the words warm in her mouth. Little Bear. Feather, they watched her with big, trusting eyes, waiting to see if she would judge them or fear them. But Emily only nodded with compassion. She had grown up around harsh people. Around those who saw differences as danger, she never did. "Where is your family?" she asked gently, not wanting to bring them more sadness but needing to understand what had happened. Little Bear looked down at his hands. "We were traveling with our father," he said slowly. "He is a warrior, strong and brave. He walks like the wind and fights like the mountain lion," Feather nodded, trying to be brave too, though her eyes shimmered with tears. Emily listened closely as Little Bear continued. "The storm came fast. It was night. We were riding with him and some others. Then everything turned white. His voice cracked. We got separated. He told us to hold on to him. But the horses panicked. We fell in the snow. We shouted his name. But the wind took our voices." Emily felt pain for them, imagining the terror of two small children alone in such a deadly storm. Little Bear looked at the fire, his face filled with guilt. "I tried to carry Feather," he whispered. "She was cold. I thought if we walked, Papa would hear us." His shoulders trembled, but I couldn't find him. I couldn't find anyone. Emily placed a comforting hand on his back. "You did everything you could," she said softly. "You kept your sister alive? That takes strength," Feather sniffed. Rubbing her eyes, "Papa will come," she murmured. "He always comes," Emily nodded. "Yes, he will," she said firmly. "And until he does, you have a safe place here." The storm continued to rage outside, shaking the windows, making the cabin groan under the weight of wind and snow. But inside, the air grew warmer, calmer. Full of a quiet hope, Emily gave them more blankets. Tucking them close to the fire, the children began to relax, their bodies no longer stiff with cold fear. As the hours passed, Feather fell asleep first, her small hand clutching Emily's sleeve tightly. Little Bear stayed awake, watching the flames, thinking deeply. "You're not scared being alone here?" he asked suddenly. Emily smiled faintly. Sometimes, she admitted, the nights can be long, the storms can be loud. But everyone is scared sometimes, Little Bear nodded. As if her honesty made him trust her more. "Papa says fear is just a shadow," he said. "He says a brave heart walks through it." "That's very wise," Emily replied. "Your father sounds like a strong man." "He is," Little Bear whispered proudly. "He will come for us." Emily glanced at the window where the snow continued to fall in thick, heavy sheets. She hoped he was right. She hoped the warrior had survived this terrible storm and would soon find his way to her doorstep. For now, she focused on keeping the children safe. She moved quietly around the cabin, warming stones near the fire and placing them near their feet. She hung damp clothes on the line above the fire and checked their temperatures again. By the time evening settled over the mountains, the children were warm, fed, and beginning to regain their strength. Little Bear lay beside his sister, his eyes slowly drifting shut. "Thank you," he whispered to Emily. "You saved us." Emily paused, emotion twisting gently in her chest. "Anyone would have," she said softly. But Little Bear shook his head faintly. "Not anyone," he murmured. "Only someone with a good heart," Emily swallowed, touched by the honesty of his words. As the blizzard roared through the night, Emily sat awake beside them, protecting two children she had met only hours ago, yet already cared for deeply. In the silence between the storm's howls, she made a quiet promise. She would not let anything happen to Little Bear and Feather. Not while they were under her roof. Morning came slowly, pushing aside the long night of roaring winds and icy darkness. When the first gray light touched the horizon, Emily felt her tired eyes burn. She had not slept, not even for a moment. She spent the entire night watching the two children, keeping the fire alive, and listening for anything that might signal danger or hope. Little Bear and Feather were still sleeping, curled together under layers of blankets. Their breathing was steady now, their skin warmer. Emily felt relief wash through her every time she checked them. They were alive, truly alive. She stood by the window, rubbing her arms to warm herself. The blizzard had calmed, but not fully ended. Snow still drifted from the sky, but now the wind had softened into a quiet whisper instead of a violent roar. The world outside looked peaceful, but Emily knew it hid the deep scars of the night before. The storm had been cruel, and no one survived such a storm without something or someone guiding them. Emily believed the children had survived for a reason. As the morning grew brighter, Emily stepped outside for a moment. She wrapped a heavy blanket around herself and stood on her porch. The snow lay in thick waves across the land. Shining under the pale sun, her breath formed white clouds, and everything felt too quiet. Then she heard it, a faint sound at first, carried on the soft wind, hoofbeats. Emily's heart jumped. She stepped forward, squinting into the distance. At first she saw nothing but white. Then slowly, shapes began to emerge, dark shapes moving steadily toward her cabin, horses and riders. She gasped softly. Her pulse quickened. She knew immediately who they must be. A Blackfeet search party. Her mind raced as she hurried back into the cabin. The children were waking up. Their eyes sleepy and confused, Feather sat up, rubbing her small fists against her eyes. "Emily," she whispered, "why are you running?" Emily dropped to her knees beside them, her voice gentle but hurried. "There are people coming," she said. "Your people, I think." Little Bear's eyes widened, fear flickering across his face. "Papa?" he asked, his voice trembling with hope and worry. "I don't know yet," Emily said softly, "but someone is searching. And they're almost here." Little Bear helped his sister stand, both of them holding tightly to Emily's hands as she led them to the door. The riders came closer, their horses laboring through deep snow. Emily could now see their traditional clothing, their braided hair, their bows, and blankets. Their faces were tight with worry and exhaustion. When they spotted Emily and the two children at the cabin door, everything changed. A shout broke through the cold air, sharp with relief. The riders kicked their horses faster, snow flying behind them as they surged forward. Emily held Feather protectively, but Little Bear stepped forward, his face filled with recognition. "Uncle." Little Bear cried out, his voice shaking. One of the riders, a tall man with long dark hair and a scar across his brow, jumped off his horse before it even stopped. He ran toward them, dropping to his knees in the snow as he pulled the children into his arms. "Little Bear, Feather," he whispered, tears gathering in his eyes. "We thought the storm took you." The children clung to him, sobbing softly, their small hands gripping his clothes as if afraid he might vanish. The other riders surrounded them, their faces softening with relief and gratitude. They looked at Emily with deep respect, their expressions saying more than words could. The man holding the children finally turned to her. "You saved them," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They would not be here without you." Emily shook her head. "Embarrassed by the praise, I only found them by luck," she said quietly. "Anyone would have helped." One of the women riding with the group stepped forward, placing her hand over her heart. "Not anyone," she said softly. "Not everyone walks into a storm." Little Bear wiped his eyes and pointed toward the horizon. "Where is Papa?" he asked, his voice breaking. The man hesitated before answering. "He is still searching," he said. "He rode toward the far ridge." He would not stop. Emily felt a wave of sadness for the warrior who did not yet know his children were alive. The search party prepared to take the children back. But before leaving, the man bowed his head to Emily, a gesture of deep honor. "Our warrior, Talon, will come to thank you himself," he said. "He does not abandon those who save his blood." Feather hugged Emily tightly, whispering, "We will come back." Emily's eyes softened. "I will be here," she said gently. As the riders carried the children away, Emily stood in the snow, watching them disappear across the white plains. She felt the cold on her skin, but warmth in her heart. The children were safe. Their people had found them, but one thing lingered in her mind. The warrior father who rode through the blizzard still did not know the truth, and when he learned it, nothing would stop him from finding the woman who saved his children. The storm had swallowed the land, but Talon kept riding. His horse stumbled through the deep snow, its breath forming heavy clouds in the freezing air. Talon's long hair was stiff with frost, his hands raw from gripping the reins for so many hours, yet he did not stop, not even to rest. Every father feared losing his children, but for Talon, Little Bear and Feather were more than the beating of his heart. They were the last pieces of his wife, the woman he had lost years ago to sickness. He had promised her he would raise them with strength, with honor, with love, and now the storm had torn them away from him. He replayed the moment of separation again and again in his mind. The wind screaming, horses panicking, snow turning everything white. One moment his children were behind him on horseback, the next they were gone. He had shouted their names, voice hoarse, but the storm swallowed his calls like a hungry beast. Talon guided his horse across the far ridge, his eyes scanning every shape. Every shadow, snow blinded him, but he refused to blink. He searched the ground for small footprints, broken branches, anything to show his children had passed through. Hours became a blur. His body cried for sleep. But Talon would not give in. Warriors could endure many things, but a father with lost children knew no limits. At one point, his horse slowed, trembling from exhaustion. Talon leaned forward and whispered softly into its ear. "Just a little more," he murmured. "My children need me." The horse pushed on, loyal and brave, as night took over the land again. Talon struggled to stay upright. The cold bit through his layers of fur and leather, sinking into his bones. His fingers had gone numb long ago, his lips were cracked. Bleeding from the wind, still he rode. Snow drifted down from the dark sky like falling stars. The world felt endless, silent, and empty. And yet Talon believed no. He knew his children were alive somewhere. He refused to let the storm write the end of their story. By dawn, Talon reached the highest ridge. From here he could see far across the plains now that the blizzard had weakened. His eyes scanned the white land, searching for movement, footprints, a fire, anything. But there was nothing. Nothing, except deep snow and the quiet of a land after a battle. His heart tightened painfully, for the first time since the storm began. Talon's strength wavered. A heavy ache filled his chest, fear whispering its cruel lies. What if they were gone? What if he was too late? He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. Trying to silence the fear, he remembered Feather's laughter, Little Bear's brave smile, the warmth of their small hands in his. He would find them, or he would die searching. That was the promise he made to himself. He turned his horse toward the valley below. But before he could move far, a distant sound caught his ear. Hoofbeats, many of them. Talon straightened. Every sense alive, a search party. His people rode toward him, their horses moving quickly across the snow. Talon kicked his horse forward, meeting them halfway. His voice was rough as he called out, "Did you see any sign? Any tracks? Any trace of them?" The lead rider held up his hand. "Talon," he said, voice steady yet shaken. "Come down from the ridge, we must speak." Talon felt his stomach twist. He sensed something enormous in the man's voice, something heavy. They rode together until they reached a small clearing sheltered by trees. The other riders gathered around, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. The leader dismounted and placed a hand on Talon's shoulder. "Your children are alive," he said. For a moment Talon could not breathe. His knees weakened. His chest filled with overwhelming emotion. "Alive," he whispered, the word trembling out of him. "They were found," the rider continued. "A woman saved them." A white woman living alone in a cabin by the western woods. Talon swallowed hard, disbelief and gratitude crashing through him like a wave. "A woman," he repeated. "Yes," the rider said. "She brought them into her home during the storm. She kept them warm, fed them, protected them." The snow around Talon blurred as tears stung his eyes. He bowed his head. whispering a prayer of thanks to the spirits. "Where are my children now?" Talon asked, voice shaking. "They were brought back to camp this morning," the rider replied. "They are safe. They asked for you." Talon closed his eyes again. Relief pouring through him, washing away the fear that had lived inside him for days. His children lived. They had survived the storm. But there was something else burning inside him now. A deep sense of honor, gratitude, respect. He opened his eyes, filled with purpose. "Take me to the woman," he said. "I must thank her with my own breath." The riders nodded. Understanding the weight of his words, a warrior never forgot the one who saved his blood. Despite his exhaustion, despite the cold tearing at his muscles, Talon mounted his horse again. He rode not as a man weakened by the storm, but as a father whose heart had been returned to him. With every step his horse took toward Emily Turner's cabin, Talon felt a growing fire inside him. A fire fueled by love, gratitude, and the promise he intended to keep. Talon rode with the search party at first, but soon his urgency pushed him ahead. His horse fought the snow with tired legs. Yet it obeyed him, understanding the weight of the moment. The cold burned Talon's skin, but he did not feel it anymore. His mind was fixed on one thing: the woman who had saved his children. The plains stretched before him, white and endless. The storm had softened into gentle flakes drifting from a quiet sky. The land looked peaceful now. As if trying to hide how violently it had tried to take 2 young lives, Talon looked at the sky with narrowed eyes. He had fought many enemies, but this storm had been the cruelest. He rode past frozen creeks, past trees bent under heavy snow, past footprints left by the search party earlier that morning. His heart beat hard against his ribs. Not from fear, but from anticipation. His children were alive. He repeated that truth again and again in his mind, letting it give him strength, little bear and feather. He could almost hear their voices carried on the wind, almost feel their small hands in his again. The thought filled his chest with warmth no winter could freeze. The trail to the cabin was narrow, leading through the western woods. Talon knew this land well, though he rarely traveled this path. Few people lived this far out, and even fewer survived alone through harsh winters. Whoever this woman was, she had courage. She had risked her life in a blizzard to save 2 children who were strangers to her. Talon respected bravery, but this was something greater. As he rode deeper into the forest, the tall pines shielded him from the cold winds. The world felt quieter, almost sacred. Snow fell softly around him, settling on his horse's mane. Melting against his warm breath, he paused at a small clearing, taking a moment to breathe. His body ached with exhaustion, but his spirit was steady. His children lived. A voice inside him whispered that their lives were tied to this woman now. That fate had chosen her for a reason. He urged his horse forward once more. The creaking sound of snow beneath hooves echoing through the woods. Not far ahead, smoke rose from a chimney, thin and gray against the white sky. Talon's chest tightened. That must be her home. The woman's cabin. He slowed his horse, not wanting to startle whoever lived there. His breath came out in uneven puffs as he approached the small wooden house. Snow covered its roof like a soft blanket, and footprints were scattered around the porch. The place looked warm, lived in, cared for. There was strength in its simplicity. Talon dismounted, landing heavily in the snow. His legs trembled from his long ride. But he stood tall. He adjusted his fur cloak, brushed snow from his hair, and walked toward the door with steady steps. Each step carried weight, the weight of gratitude, of relief, of a father's love. Inside, Emily Turner was sweeping the floor, trying to bring order back to her small cabin after the long night. She had slept only an hour or 2. Exhaustion tugging at her, but she kept moving. She kept thinking about the children and their father. She wondered if he had found them, if he was safe, if he even knew what had happened. Suddenly, a heavy knock echoed through the cabin. Deep and strong, Emily froze, her heart jumping. That sound felt different, not like a neighbor, not like a traveler, but someone carrying a heavy purpose. She set her broom aside and walked toward the door. Her hand shook slightly as she reached for the latch. When she opened it, cold air rushed in, along with a tall, shadowed figure standing against the pale winter light. Talon, Emily's breath caught in her throat. She'd never seen a man like him. He stood proud, but exhausted, snow clinging to his clothes. Frost covering the edges of his braids, his eyes dark, sharp, but full of emotion met hers with a weight she felt deep inside. He bowed his head slowly, respectfully. "You are the woman," he said in a low voice. "The one who saved my children." Emily felt warmth rise in her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "I found them in the storm. I only did what anyone would do." Talon lifted his gaze, his tired eyes steady and intense. "Not anyone," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Many would have turned away. Many would have feared my people. But you walked into the storm." Emily swallowed softly. Unsure how to respond, she moved aside, motioning for him to enter. Talon stepped inside slowly, as if entering sacred ground. His eyes scanned the small cabin, the blankets still on the floor, the warm stones, the fire that had kept his children alive. He felt something tighten in his chest, something deep and powerful. He turned back to Emily, his voice low but steady. "I owe you more than thanks," he said. "You returned my heart to me." Emily stood silently, struck by the raw truth of his words in that quiet moment. With snow falling softly outside and warmth filling the small cabin, two lives touched by a storm met for the first time. And though neither of them knew it yet, this meeting would change everything that came after. The warmth of the cabin wrapped around Talon like a soft blanket after a lifetime in the cold. The sudden contrast made his legs shake, but he stood tall, refusing to show weakness. Emily noticed the way his shoulders trembled and how frost clung stubbornly to his hair and clothes. "Come near the fire," she said gently. Moving aside so he could step closer, Talon hesitated for a moment. Not out of pride, but out of respect. This home had protected his children, and stepping into it felt like stepping into sacred ground. Still, his body needed the heat, and so he moved toward the fire. Lowering himself slowly to the floor beside it, Emily watched him carefully, seeing the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He looked like a man carved from stone but pushed to his breaking point. His eyes, though steady and sharp, carried the pain of sleepless days. "Your children? They were very brave," she said softly. Not sure if she should speak at all, Talon closed his eyes briefly. As if absorbing the truth of her words. "They are strong," he whispered. "Stronger than they should have to be." Emily sat across from him, giving him space but staying close enough to show comfort. She poured warm tea into a wooden cup and slid it toward him. "Here," she said. "It will help." Talon looked at the cup, then at her. His expression softened. He lifted it with trembling fingers and took a slow sip. The warmth spread through him, easing the cold that had buried itself deep in his bones for a long moment. There was only quiet, just the crackle of the fire and the slow, heavy breathing of a man who had fought against nature itself. Finally, Talon spoke, his voice low and unsteady. "I rode for 2 days," he said. "No sleep, no rest. The storm tried to take me as well." Emily's eyes widened. 2 days, she repeated, shocked. "In that weather?" Talon nodded. "A father does not stop when his children are missing." Emily felt a tightness in her chest. She could not imagine the fear he must have felt, the desperation, the way the snow must have felt like an enemy. "What kept you going?" she asked softly. Talon opened his eyes, and a faint flicker of something bright shone within them. "Their voices," he said. "I kept hearing Feather laugh. I kept seeing Little Bear trying to be brave." Emily swallowed gently, moved by the honesty he shared. "They needed you," she whispered. "And you found them." Talon shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You found them." Those words settled between them like falling snow, soft but powerful. Emily shifted uncomfortably, unused to praise. "Anyone would have helped," she insisted. Talon's gaze sharpened. "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone would walk into a storm. Not anyone would carry 2 freezing children across snow that steals breath and life." He leaned forward slightly. "You saved them with your courage Emily's cheeks warmed from more than the fire. She looked down, her fingers tightening on her skirt. Talon's voice dropped to a rough whisper. "When the search party told me they found my children alive in the cabin of a white woman," he paused, emotion catching in his throat. "I thought they were mistaken." Emily lifted her eyes slowly. "Why? Because kindness like that is rare," Talon replied. "Too rare." The flames danced in the hearth, their light reflecting in his tired eyes. Emily could see the depth of his gratitude, deeper than words could hold. He reached into a leather pouch tied to his belt and pulled out a small, hand-carved figure of a hawk. The wooden bird was shaped with care, its wings spread as if ready to fly. He placed it gently on the floor in front of her. Emily frowned slightly, unsure. "What is this?" "A gift," Talon said. "A symbol of honor in my tribe. A hawk represents vision, courage, and spirit. It is given only to those who see with true heart." Emily's lips parted in surprise. I can't accept something so meaningful," but Talon shook his head. "You must," he said softly. "For you carried my children when the wind tried to bury them. For you warmed them when the cold tried to steal them. This is the smallest thing I can offer." Emily touched the wooden hawk with gentle fingers, feeling the smooth surface, the careful lines. It felt warm, despite being carved from old wood. "Talon," she whispered, moved. "You don't owe me anything? I owe you everything," he replied, quiet but unshakable. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, the world outside ceased to exist. No snow, no storm, no fear, only a father and a woman whose courage had changed the shape of his life. The fire crackled, warming their tired bodies. Slowly, Emily stood, then extended her hand to him. "Would you like something to eat?" she asked. Her voice soft. Talon bowed his head respectfully. "Yes," he murmured, "but only if I can help." He reached toward the blanket hanging near the fire, touching its edge with respect. "This belongs to you now," he said, "and with it, you will always have a place among us." Emily swallowed, overcome by the warmth of his words. She didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. Outside, the sun disappeared behind the trees, leaving the cabin glowing softly in the light of the fire. Inside, Emily, Talon, Feather, and Little Bear sat together, sharing stories, sharing warmth, sharing a bond born not from blood, but from courage and fate. A storm had brought them together, but something deeper would keep them connected. And as laughter filled the small wooden cabin, Emily realized something she had never expected. She was no longer alone, and she never would be again.